Welcome to Grandma Has ADHD, the podcast exploring the surprising, challenging, and often overlooked world of ADHD in seniors. I'm your host, Jami Shapiro, the founder of Silver Linings Transitions and an ADHD specialist. Professionally, as a senior move manager for more than 10 years, I've worked intimately with seniors challenged with decluttering and downsizing. Personally, I am the child of two ADHD parents, and I have ADHD. ADHD isn't something that goes away with age. Grandma Has ADHD is here to educate and entertain seniors and those who love them with stories of hope, resilience, and strategies, because it's never too late to understand yourself better and find your tribe. Let's get started with today's episode. Hi, and welcome back to Grandma Has ADHD, a podcast for all things senior related and ADHD. And I am excited to be bringing back Dr. Daniella Karidi, PhD, CPC, and founder of ADHD Time, a coaching practice based in Encino, California. She specializes in empowering individuals going through transitions, life transitions, who also have ADHD. And that transition can be going off to college, starting a job, entering retirement. And I wanted to bring her in today because she's talking about a unique, maybe sensitive transition that we in our society generally don't really like to talk about. And that is end of life or death. A lot of times we don't even want to use that word, but I was so excited as somebody who works with seniors as a senior move manager. I'm the owner and founder of Silver Linings Transitions in San Diego, California. We help seniors who are right sizing into senior communities, moving to be near family, but making a large life transition. And oftentimes it could be the last move that they make before they die. And we're helping them shed a lifetime of belongings and go through everything. And we still don't like to use the language that time is so deserving of. So I was so excited that Dr. Daniella Karidi specializes in this among coaching seniors who have ADHD. She's super accomplished in her own right and is a member of the I Have ADHD tribe. So welcome to Grandma Has ADHD, Daniella.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for letting me talk about this important topic, because I feel that unfortunately we don't like to talk about things that scare us.
Right. And maybe sometimes I always tell people to go into a new situation with curiosity. I mean, sometimes I remember I was having a colonoscopy and it's really scary to go under a procedure. And I just decided that I was going to approach it with curiosity. So how was it feeling in this and what was going on around me? And that really calmed me down. And I don't know what you're going to talk about today, but that was just my observation of going through something that was a little less than pleasant. But I figured since we're talking to seniors, I can talk about colonoscopies.
And I think talking is the number one tip that I would give. Many times we assume we know what other people want, or we think other people know what we want for our end of life. If it's for how we want to be buried or cremated, or how we want our care. If some people make a lot of assumptions about the way they want to live their end and the way others. So my number one message, if any message comes out today, is talk with your kids, talk with your friends, talk with your family, talk with your neighbors. Don't keep this information a secret, because it's not going to help when you're gone.
No, absolutely. Well, first of all, just in case people are coming to this episode first, give us a little bit about your ADHD story and how you ended up in coaching. And then with this new, I would say new, it's not new, death and dying are guaranteed, but I mean, how you got here.
So I have ADHD and learning disability. I was diagnosed first with my learning disability, with my reading challenges, and only later in life in college, I was diagnosed with ADHD. Many years, my mom was told girls can't have ADHD, especially not smart ones. So it was really only in college where I finally got the approval that I have ADHD. I love this world because I'm involved in it in so many levels. I have done my research on memory and ADHD, and that's where I got my PhD at Northwestern University, where I focused on how we remember the future, which can be a whole talk by itself, but it's the idea if I tell you, call me at 4:00 tomorrow, or I tell you, buy milk on the way home, that's remembering to do things in the future.
Right.
And
Wow.
I was really interested in how people fail or succeed in that. And unfortunately, in academia, failed me in the way that I couldn't find the right opportunities to help people. So I left the academia because I really wanted to make a difference in people's life. And that's how I kind of got into coaching, because I wanted to be able to sit in front of a person and not just say a quote from a research, but I wanted to be able to offer some solutions and some support and some advice and a lot of accountability. And that's kind of how I got into coaching. My training is from both the world of the
Sorry, I'm totally I'm ADHDing on you. I'm interrupting. But one of the things that I learned in my studies of ADHD is that those of us with ADHD tend to have a great sense of what's fair and doing the right thing. And I think that the fact that you want to help other people, just strong sense of justice right there. So I interrupted you. I hope you can pick it back up because
it's okay.
Okay, great.
What I was going to say, that led me to coaching. And then when I went into the world of coaching, I was trying to balance being a mother and a coach. And that's where I got myself into the world of retirees and older adults because they were home when my kids were at school. Mm-hmm. And that kind of is what brought me into that world. While at the same time, I've been working with executives at big companies. So I kind of and now I like helping empty nesters and retirees and execs that are transitioning into new positions. And I got really interested in transitions. And in the process of being interested in transitions, I tried to read everything I could find about retiring. And I got a gift from a friend that was a book that's called How to Prepare to Be Hit by a Bus.
Wow.
And then I realized I'm definitely not prepared. I do not have a will or a trust. I don't know what my partner prefers. I don't think my kids have any clue where any password is. I don't know what will happen to the dog, which, by the way, in the state of California, if you don't say, then the state gets to decide. So understanding those things kind of gave me an aha moment. And I realized that I have a lot of personal work to do. And being an ADHDer that gets motivated by others, I started a group to try to help me do it, to prepare for my end of life. And then people kept on asking to join. So I have a group. It's like a 2-month thing. You meet once a week and you try to tackle these end of life projects. And this is kind of how I got into end of life planning.
Wow. So, okay, that group, if somebody wanted to find that group, since you've mentioned it, is that an online group? Is that local in Encino? How would they find you?
The group can be found on my webpage. And there'll be a link also for a checklist. It's called the End of Life ADHD-friendly checklist. And I'm sure you can add the link, but you can find both of those on my webpage, both the group, which I think the new one will be starting in the summer, and also the checklist for those that are interested in using it. It's a checklist that we built as we were going of the things we want to keep track of. And it's just a PDF of 1 page of things that we need to talk about or think about when we're thinking about end of life.
So that is ADHDtime.com, right? That's your website.
Yep.
Okay, great. So what are the unique challenges of somebody with ADHD who's preparing for the end of life? Where does that intersect?
So one important challenge is the difficulty of seeing the future. We love living in the moment. We also need immediate satisfaction. And I think that the example I give people is when we teach our kids to brush teeth, many times the kids are brushing their teeth not because of future, my teeth will be healthy, but because the immediate being afraid or concerned of that cavity or pain, or the immediate, like my mom wants me to be happy, I'm doing what she told. There's that not thinking of, hey, when I'm going to be older, I need healthy teeth. That faraway thought doesn't happen. So it's one challenge is the future thinking. The other is the fear of making mistakes and wanting it to be perfect. So sometimes we don't want to write a will or take care of our finances or do these things because we're afraid of getting it wrong, or we can't do it to the level that we will feel happy with. And There's some fear of rejection when we have to go out to someone and ask for them to be a guardian of our kids or our animals. There's a fear of also just anxiety about the future that can interact with our ADHD, because anxiety is so comorbid with ADHD.
Right, for sure.
Another thing I hear a lot is, I don't have money, so what do I have to bother? And I have some bad news. You can leave your family your debt too. So it's better to have your things in order and allow them to have access to that information, so they can be better prepared to support themselves too.
Mm-hmm.
And planning for the future, for the end of life, is not only about money or your family. It's also about how you want to be remembered, what is important to you, how you want to be celebrated, or what are the things that you hope to leave afterwards to the next generation.
Right. So, one thing that you didn't give me in the questions that we discussed, but I think it's important that we touch on it, is that comorbidity of anxiety and ADHD. I know I was traveling, my middle child at the time was 2. I didn't have my third yet. And we were going to be traveling cross country. And it was when I got my will in order, because I realized that now I had children and I wanted my wishes to be known. But it caused me quite a bit of anxiety on that trip to now look at the fact that, did doing the will mean that now something was going to happen? So how do you address that with your ADHD clients who may have anxiety? Like, just going ahead and talking about and preparing for it.
I'm going to try to show you the other light of this. That anxiety motivates you to take action, to create a will that now, if needed, you have it. So anxiety can affect us in both directions. It can motivate our actions, especially when we're talking about fear of future. That possibility that your kid may be cared by someone you don't want them to, or will be in a situation that's not what you wish it to be, could motivate us. The fear of causing others suffering could be a motivator sometimes. But the other side of the anxiety that you were bringing up is the negative thinking that if I create a will, something bad would happen. Then one of the things we do is what if you don't create a will? What are the things that could happen? And this is where I kind of remind people all the negative things that can happen if they don't take action to plan the future. If they want to be buried, they could be cremated. If they want a specific care, if they want to stay home and not be in the hospital, they could be stuck in a hospital because family doesn't know what they want. So I'm trying to emphasize that understanding the anxieties is step 1. Talking about it is step 2. And putting it in writing, the things that are important to you, are step 3. And by putting it in writing, you're not going to make it happen. You're actually preventing disasters.
That's very valid. That's great. I know we want to talk about what are the common mistakes that people make when they are starting to think about end of life planning. But I think what we should do is we should pause and take a break for our sponsors, and then come back and have everyone listen to your advice on preventing those mistakes. If you are listening to this podcast, there's a good chance you or a loved one is feeling overwhelmed by the challenges of ADHD or disorganization. Since those of us with ADHD tend to struggle with where to begin big projects like moving or home organizing, the Silver Linings Transitions team can guide you through the process, breaking tasks down into manageable steps or handling every detail. There's a reason our team carries magic wands when we work with our clients. We can pack and move your entire home, and you won't have to miss a day of work or touch a single box. We also provide home organizing and storage sort-outs with an understanding of ADHD. If you have a home to sell, we can provide you free or discounted services when we refer you to one of our realtor partners through our realtor referral program. Visit our website at www.silverliningstransitions.com or call us at 760-522-1624 to learn more about how we can help you make your move or home organizational project magical. And we are back with Dr. Daniella Karidi of ADHDtime.com. So welcome back. We left you hanging with a big question.
Before we get into that, I have a question for you. I popped on real quick, and I know that I could have asked you this while we were on our break, but I figured I would rather ask you in front of all your listeners because that's just how I am as a person.
Who's you? Who's the you, Justin? Me or Daniela?
You, Jami.
Okay.
Yeah. So
What's
I
the
know that we
question?
had Daniela on previously, and I don't know. I just kind of feeling like you're not being as your chipper self on this one. What's going on?
Right. Well, yeah, so that's true. And it's interesting because I shared at the introduction that, our society isn't really comfortable talking about death, which is an inevitable thing. And so, introducing it as a topic is also, I think it does affect my energy. And I think it's really relevant. First of all, I think that should be addressed. Like, I'm not really comfortable with it either. And so I think that it is a little bit hard to be chipper, but at the same time, I think that this work is so necessary. And I'd love to share a story with you before we answer that question, since it really relates to that. And my grandmother died. First of all, so as I shared in previous podcasts, Justin and I are related through our father's side. So I was my grandmother's only grandchild on my mom's side, and she passed away unexpectedly from a medical mistake. And, her affairs were not left in order. And there was a lamp that she had promised me from the time I was 4 years old that it was going to be mine one day. And, she didn't put my name on the bottom of it like she said she would. And I ended up not getting the lamp. Let me say I have it now because I was going to advocate for my rights because, again, that sense of justice with we ADHDers. But, as much as I love my grandmother, she could have and should have prepared better for our family. And I'll also share with you that my mother ended up doing what's called grief hoarding, which is that she was not prepared to make the decisions about all of my grandmother's things, which is why we always advocate for our clients to address it with Swedish death cleaning and very proactively. But she didn't do that. And my mom, who was in a total state of shock because it was an unexpected death, pretty much brought everything that wasn't wanted by family members or complete trash back into her home. And then my mother was dealing with basically a lot of depression and, hoarding disorder, although it was situational. So I do think that it's really important that this is important work and it's important that we talk about it. But a very long answer to your short question is just, where is my normal pep? There you go. So having said all that, we left you with what are the common mistakes that people make when they are preparing for end of life, Daniela?
So I'll start with reminding everyone that I am a coach and not a lawyer or a doctor. And any advice I give should be checked with any professional, the right professional, the doctors and lawyers as needed. I think the number one mistake is not planning, is not having a written information to share with others, assuming others will know your wishes or know that was supposed to be your lamp. So that kind of assumption and not having information recorded or in writing, I think is the number one mistake. The second mistake is people thinking about it as one big thing. Planning for the end of life, I have to do everything. Versus every little step that you do can make a significant difference for the people you leave behind. So even if all you have is a recorded wishes of what you want, better than not having nothing. If you have recorded wishes plus a will, even better. If you have an attorney that helped you estate plan and you have a will and recorded wishes, 3 wins. If you have a file at your home and someone knows where that file is, another win. So all these little wins can build up to making a difference, but you don't have to do all of them, and it doesn't happen overnight. We lived this long. If it took you 40 years, 30 years, 70 years to get here, don't expect it'll take you 2 hours to plan the rest of your life.
Right. I always tell our clients, perfect is the enemy of done. And,
sure.
And you just broke down another ADHD, which is chunking things down. We don't have to do it all at once. Our father uses an expression, how do you eat an elephant? Do you know the answer, Justin? Has he used it on you?
I've heard a lot of his expressions, but he
has some good ones.
He does have some good ones, and I do use some of them on the reg, but I have not heard this one. This one is
a bite at a time. You eat an elephant a bite at a time.
A bite at a time. Right.
I think I got an updated version of that. I get the go as far as you can see a lot further from there. So I think I got an updated version of that.
And I have another one that I like that maybe applies to this conversation, which is Mark Twain's expression of eating the frog. Do you guys know what that is?
With the boiling water?
No, eating the frog. So what he says is that, we're going to have to do unpleasant things every day. That if you start your day eating the frog, doing that unpleasant thing, then for the rest of your day, everything will be much better. So you could, maybe if you're working on your end of life planning, make it something that happens in the beginning of the day, and then you've taken care of it if you're like me and the subject makes you uncomfortable. So
one of the things we do every Thanksgiving in my holiday is we ask around the table what people are thankful for, but we also ask, if God forbid something happens to you and this was your last year, what would you want people to know? What would you want people to share? And we make it normal to talk about end of life. We put it in celebrations. My daughter just turned 18 recently, and one of her gifts were legal documents to sign. We used a company, and you can find a link to like Mama Bear legal documents on my website. But in general, the idea is by putting these in like normalized conversation, adding it, talked with someone and she does marriage counseling, and she puts part of that, she puts end of life planning in the marriage counseling process.
Wow.
So I think that understanding that life and death are together and they're part of the cycle, and putting it and normalizing it into our conversations and allowing ourselves to ask about people's preferences and thoughts is really an important part of planning for end of life.
I love that you do that. So have you heard of death cafes before?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So I have to share a funny, Justin, do you know what a death cafe is? So a death cafe, he's shaking his head no. So a death cafe is basically when you come together with strangers and you have conversations, and they're all over the world, not just the country. They're set up. And we'll put a link to the show notes actually in that as well. But you have a conversation about what death looks like, and they're prompted conversations. And I remember going to one it was geared to senior industry professionals so that we could experience what these death cafes are like. And there was a woman probably in her mid-20s, and the answer to her prompt, and I'm not even making this up, she says, well, if I die, I put my hand on her hand and I was like, there is no if you die. There is going to be, and it's just so funny. So I'm actually going to take that one from you, Daniella, because I tell my kids we're building a resiliency muscle when we face adversity in our lives, and it's giving us the tools that we need to face the next adversity. Because, unfortunately, life can be hard, and we have easy times and hard times, and just bringing kind of inoculating the conversation so that it is more normalized.
And when we talk about teenagers, I like to say, okay, whatever social media you have, let's say your TikTok account, let's say, what will happen, God forbid, if you die tomorrow? Does someone know how to access it? Someone knows how to put notification about your death. What do you want up there? What do you want the world to see about you? Is your social world accessible to someone else in the way that they could manage it if needed? I gave a whole talk about how to protect our identities for the afterlife, and that's all parts of our identity. Like, what about those secret letters maybe you don't want someone to find? I had a client that found out the hard way that her dad had another marriage before he married her mom that he never told them about. And she found out by going over his stuff after he died.
So I have a joke for you on this one. This is another one that when I talk about Swedish death cleaning, when I do the right sizing, downsizing talks to our audience, a lot of people know what Swedish death cleaning is, which is basically proactively going through your home as if you had passed, but leaving your affairs in order. But I've invented what I call the tequila box. So what that is that box of things that you tell people, you write on the box, do not open. They're things you don't want to get rid of, but you don't necessarily want found. And then I always ask the audience, how many people think that you're going to have a family member that's going to ignore that message that says, do not open, and open it anyway? What do you think the answer is, Danielle? You think people say, no, that never happens?
Oh, it's like people tell you they won't look at the screen at someone else on the plane, and everyone looks at that screen. Come on.
Right, exactly. So what I tell them is put a bottle of tequila in the box with a note that said, I did ask you not to open it, but since you're going to go there, have some laughs. And that's my sort of the one thing that I tell people, and it gets a laugh. And it does sort of make lightness of a heavy topic. But so thank you. So you had a couple other questions that I wanted to make sure that I covered. And one of them was, how do you approach the discussions about sensitive topics like end of life wishes and decisions with clients?
So I start where they're standing now. I start about who's in their life at the moment, who they care about, who they want to still be cared for after they're no longer here. So I start in the now. And I think that's really important because we're ADHDers and we live in the now. It's easier for us to start from it. So I start with gathering information about who you are and where you live, who you care for, who's in your life, who's in your immediate life, and who's in your surrounding life, your cousins, your far siblings, or your close siblings. Who are those people that you want to know, and what do you want them to know?
Okay. And then how do you help them identify their values and beliefs and their preferences?
So, I think that there's depending on the individual, there's a lot of tools, but I like using interviews and games. So we have a bingo that we use where we ask family members to literally take it to a dinner or take it to a night out with your friends and try to talk about as many topics here until you can hit a bingo. And it's
I love that.
A way to motivate. And I ask people, look, if you can't take notes while you're talking because you have ADHD, record it, and then transcribe it. And then you have their answers and they have your answers, and send it to them later. So it's also, so I try to find ways, if it's, there's interviewing, filling out questionnaires. We have questionnaires about medical health. We have questionnaires about, and there's all these other websites that can be used to support part of the process. But also making it fun is a really important thing to make it work for adults with ADHD.
Right. We like to gamify things. We don't like to be bored.
Right.
I heard an interview with ADHD is awesome. Penn, I can't think of his last name, Holderness. And he used the term boredom and torture. I thought that was such a great expression.
So we sometimes say, you take a jar of M&Ms, and every time you answer like a question, then that person can grab a bunch and you have to talk until you're done the M&M bag. The idea is also putting some time frame to these conversations. You're not going to spend hours sitting and crying and talking and rehashing emotions. That also serves a purpose, like putting a limit, because we can hyperfocus too.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, so give us an example of a client that you like, a real life, like how you helped. I think that would help people get an understanding.
So I had a client that unfortunately her mother passed away when when her baby was a few months old. So she really was traumatized by her mother's death and was very worried every step of her daughter's life that something's going to happen to her. So she had very strong emotions that stopped her from planning for the end of life. And she tried to join the group, and the group really just increased her anxiety, which I want to give credit for her for trying to do this first. Like anyone that's planning for end of life, great job. Like that's already a good start. And then she realized that she needs to get therapy and help her overcome some of her anxieties. So she took a bit of a break. And this is where a good coach says, good luck, see you in a few months. And she came back and we worked it step by step. And we started with a step that was easy. We talked about what she wishes to happen in her end of life party. Like, let's just think what you want in that party. Do you want, like literally, do you want it to be a thing where people are somber, or do you want music? No music, yes music. We went through a list of a party organizing, what you want in that party of your end of life. And that kind of opened the conversation. The next session, we talked about how to choose a lawyer to help her writing her trust and will. And I literally helped her practice the conversation with the lawyer, what to bring up and how to choose that lawyer. And then after she had the lawyer, I helped her prepare the documents. So I helped her in the steps of the way. And now she has a will, a trust, a folder with all her wishes, a recording for her daughter, a recording for her daughter's future spouse, because that was really important to her, because she felt like that part, if God forbid she won't be there, did that. And then to finish it all, she has been every month putting things in a journal because that was important to her, that her daughter, when she's going to be a mom, if she's not going to be there, will have that journal.
I love that. I love that. Is there anything else you want to share before we end the episode? I have a funny story that I want to share to go out on, because it's just my nature to take something unpleasant and try to make it humorous.
So I want to share the reasons I hear and collected where people told me why they're not planning for end of life.
Okay.
So people told me one of the things is I'm young, and then unfortunately death doesn't care, and it's not protecting you. So beware. I have a ton of time. I will do it tomorrow. What we're talking about is what will happen if there is no tomorrow. So let's adjust that conversation and see what we can do today. What little thing we can do today. I don't have kids, so there's no one that I want to leave stuff for. And I'm sure even if you don't have kids, you have people in your life that really care for you and love you and actually would like some of those stuff or memories, or maybe there's a charity that you want to leave your money to. So just because you don't have kids doesn't mean you don't have things to plan for. And then my favorite is, if I don't have money, I have no need to write a will or have a trust. We have a lot of things that are not necessarily money, but are valuable to other people in our life. If it's that serving dish you use every Thanksgiving, and that's memories for them. If it's your recipe book, if it is your photo album, if maybe that's ring that you're wearing, it could be that little things that are very important to others. And I think it really helps when you have a plan what to do with it.
That is great advice. Have you seen the movie A Man Named Otto, by the way, with Tom Hanks? I just watched it.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So that, speaking of not having family, it was a tough subject, but they really, really handled it well. Okay, right. So I promised you that we were going to end this on a funny note. So one of my best friends is back in Jacksonville. Actually, her mother had a heart issue and was in the hospital. And they did have a conversation about her death because, it was touch and go. And sadly, she did end up passing. But they were like, what am I going to put on my tombstone? So literally in her last, couple of conversations with my friend in the hospital, she said, okay, I want you to put on my tombstone. If you're standing on this, if you're reading this, you're standing on my boobs. And I kid you not, that on every year for Halloween, they bring up the top 100 funniest tombstones. And her son happens to be, on social media. And he's like, great, isn't this grandma's? And he sees his grandmother's tombstone. And that just exactly summed up who she was. I mean, she was a really, really funny person. And I loved that she put that on her tombstone, because every time her family now goes to see that tombstone, they laugh. And I think that really was who she was. So thank you all for listening to this episode. I know it was not as fun as some of our other episodes, but so important in really, truly making the rest of your life the best of your life. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Daniella Karidi.
Thank you for having me.
The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.